boarding houses were the place to stay.
1/3 of Americans at one point or another in the 19th century lived in a boarding house.
Strangers thrown into a house, and you see how things are when people get real. That's what a boarding house was like. Operating a boarding house was one of the first times that a single woman could have a legitimate type of business.
As the towns grew, the boarding houses serviced those single miners that came to town, the men who did not have a wife to manage their life.
Boarding houses are like barometers or seismographs or ways of just measuring what's happening in the town.
I think that our society is going to find new ways of that in the 21st century.
From the 19th century up to the mid-20th century, boarding houses played an unimaginable and surprising role in shaping not only how people lived, but how America grew up.
This program was made possible by the History Colorado State Historical Fund,
supporting projects throughout the state to preserve, protect, and interpret Colorado's architectural and archaeological treasures. History Colorado State Historical Fund. Create the future, honor the past.
with support from the Denver Public Library, History Colorado, and the Colorado Office of Film, Television, and Media, with additional support from these organizations and viewers like you. Thank you.
Home. What could be closer to our hearts? During the industrial boom of 19th century America, home was often transient, as immigrants, laborers, and families were on the move or in search of a better life. Boarding houses offered the simple comforts of home, providing food, shelter, and community to groups of strangers, all living under the same roof. More than just a fad, boarding houses in the 19th century were a movement that not only shaped our nation, but also our very identity.
It's been estimated that between a third and up to a full half of the American population lived in boarding houses in the 19th and 20th century. They were a great place for people who were coming over to the United States or immigrating through other parts of the country into new territories.
Many of them, I think, sorted themselves out as boarding houses for the poor, for the wealthier people, for people who were German or Italian.
Boarding houses were really popular. So popular for a couple reasons. One is they were generally very, very affordable places to live. They varied between being kind of lower end versus really high end and places in the middle too.
Boarding houses were kind of like a family home. If you didn't have a family place to go, you'd knock on a door of a boarding house and see if you could rent a room there. And you would indeed usually be sharing a bathroom, maybe even a bedroom.
Boarding means you're getting food, and it means that really the main thing you're paying for is that as well. So your room is important, the shelter is important, but that socializing aspect of eating together is a part of it.
You can think of books like Little Women, and when Jo goes off and leaves her family, she moves to Boston and she stays in a mixed-gendered boarding house. Sherlock Holmes lives in a really high-end London boarding house. This place where all these people come together makes for a really exciting location where drama can happen, where romance might happen, where fights might happen. And boarding houses broke conventional norms in a number of different ways. It was not uncommon to see boarding houses run by widows whose husbands had died, and women who were single had the opportunity to earn a lot more revenue, to have that independence of home ownership, which was also very rare in the 19th century.
The on-the-ground keepers of order were women. If there was tension, if there was friction, if there was violence, it would be a wonderful demonstration of the authority that women had in settings where we often think of them as being powerless and subordinate.
I'm sure some boarding houses were not respectable, and they're known as whorehouses. But the boarding houses that we're talking about were respectable, and women would be sure to protect their reputation. And also, if a guest got fresh, you would evict that kind of client. Boarding houses, I think, would accommodate all kinds of people. No doubt there were boarding houses where gay folks were accepted, where unmarried couples could go, where a black man could find a room.
Some people saw them as a way of eroding those kind of traditional values where you had a home with a mother and a father and the children. When you break up that home and you start inviting strangers, you also can invite in vice into your home. If there's alcohol use, if there's sex or drugs or anything like that. Some people were actually very concerned that boarding houses were actually crumbling America's culture. But by the same token, it was building all of these new components, and it was facilitating this move out west.
The great author Walt Whitman described boarding houses as a kind of melting pot of America. Married men and single men, old men and pretty girls, milliners and masons, cobblers, colonels, and counterjumpers, tailors and teachers, lieutenants, loafers, ladies, lack brains and lawyers, printers and parsons, black spirits and white, blue spirits and gay, all go out to board. Walt Whitman, 1842.
I would say boarding houses were everywhere, and they were really probably most common on the East Coast. Initially, it was a phenomenon you could see in any major city. You would see them then brought out to the Midwest and out to the farther west, out to the West Coast as well.
Boarding houses would proliferate during the busts, when people couldn't afford their own homes, and big old mansions were broken up into boarding houses, and people struggling with the Great Depression would rent out rooms to anyone. And there were plenty of people, needy folks, that needed cheap housing.
The boarding house might begin as a place where working miners stayed. As that economy shifts along, as the mine might shut down, there might be a dark period where there's not much economic activity. And there's a shift of who's staying in those rooms that really reflects what is happening to the broader community and to the broader economy.
Boarding houses proliferated in Colorado's mountain towns during the gold rush and silver booms of the mid to late 1800s, accommodating prospectors and helping to tame the American West.
For people to have what they needed to have in order to live in Western locations, without the boarding house, there's a much more sparse population.
So at this point in the 1850s, there is an influx of people who were coming through Denver and to Golden specifically because they want to get up to the gold fields and later to the silver fields. Golden in the 1860s is a really booming place and very transitory. So boarding houses start popping up all over.
Nestled at the base of the Rocky Mountains, the Astor House was one of the largest and most luxurious boarding houses in Golden at the time.
The Astor House was built in 1867 by a man, his name was Seth Lake. Seth came to Colorado in the 1860s on a covered wagon. He brought his whole family out here.
He opens it as a hotel, but it soon becomes a boarding house. It was named for the famous Astor House in New York City. I guess the grandest hotel there, built by John Jacob Astor. The Astor House is made of locally quarried stone, and then they whitewashed it on the outside.
Having a real stone hotel, what really showed some permanence to the town. It was a little bit of an opulent thing to have out in Colorado as well. One of the reasons why Astor House was located where it was and was built so well was that Golden was still the territorial capital of Colorado at the time. And there was high hopes that it would become a state capital.
So that would be the ideal accommodations for legislators meeting there with the territorial legislature. The problem was he doesn't get the hotel finished until 1867, and that's the year they moved the territorial capital back to Denver.
Somehow, the Astor House continued to survive, despite the lack of a capital with legislators commuting in and out, and without the sales of something quite lucrative, booze.
Seth Lake was a deacon with the Baptist Church, and we know that he preached temperance as part of his values, and we believe that he did not actually sell alcohol there, which really must have took a bite out of his revenue. Seth Lake owns the Astor House for over 20 years. During the 1880s and the 1890s, the building is switching hands so many times. It finally ends up almost $2,000 of debt, and it sits empty, unknowing what its fate might become.
A woman named Ida Getz moves in. Her mother Getz, she was called. She was a German immigrant.
She was sort of small and mighty. She was not very tall in stature. Everyone knew her from her German accent.
Ida had married Henry Getz, a well-known tavern keeper. They were living in Georgetown, Colorado when life changed dramatically. Henry died of a stroke in 1891, leaving Ida a widow with 2 children.
She moves to Golden and she gets a loan from some of her friends, buys the Astor House in 1892, which is available then on back taxes. She gets for about $2,000. She opens it up and she moves her 2 sons in, and they start a boarding house. She makes a lot of renovations to the space. She builds a kitchen and adds a huge addition to the building with electricity, with plumbing.
She was famous for her cooking, and that, of course, would be another hallmark. You'd want a boarding house with a good cook in it.
So she's making a lot of money off the food that she makes. That we know that people would come there and pay about 25 cents and you could have a hot bath. And the Astor House is one of the first indoor heated plumbing in the area. She's very, very savvy with how she can make some additional money.
Ida even saw opportunity in the midst of disaster.
Fires are the bane of any 19th century town, especially on the frontier. We know at least 3 fires happened at the Astor House. One in 1908 started on the 2nd floor, and it just completely gutted the building. She took the opportunity to reconfigure the floor to add a few more rooms to the 2nd floor, and then she converted her attic into 3 additional small rooms, which were used almost as dormitories. Because the Astor House was in Golden, which was a university town with the Colorado School of Mines, oftentimes she would have young men staying with her, and they would call her Mother Getz, and she very much treated them like family. She was a very warm person. I think people really had a lot of admiration for her in town. Ida operates it daily until about 1915, and then Oscar, her son, and his wife, Irene Getz, take over the daily operations beginning in 1915 all the way up till the mid-1950s. Astor House in the 1960s, it was looking really rough. It was in bad condition. It had lots of problems with its roof, its foundation. As an effort to pull down blight, many older buildings like Astor House were slated for demolition.
The fate of the Astor House launched a local movement, and survival or destruction would come down to one crucial vote. Just 35 miles west of Golden, the Peck House was a refuge for many miners hoping to strike it rich. When gold was discovered in Empire in 1860, people started flocking to the region.
It's in a little network of towns where the mining rushes have brought in populations, and some people have succeeded, and there's homes built, boosters and merchants and people who see opportunity.
It was also a stage stop, and many people would stop there for a meal or perhaps decide this is a nice place to live and move in there and do their mining out of the Peck House.
The Peck family were pioneers. Mr. Peck was 60 years old when he came out. He was a very successful businessman in Chicago. They heard there was gold fields. He decided he thought he'd take a shot at coming out and seeing what he could do.
James Peck staked several claims in Empire, one which became the most developed gold mine in the district. He not only saw profits in the gold, but in the miners as well.
James Peck built what's now the oldest hotel in Colorado. By 1864, it's also a boarding house. He and his family lived there, and they started taking in boarders. The Peck House was made of local lumber. It was sawed there in Empire, so it was very well built. It's held up very well to this day.
And these were people who knew how to build, how to make things. Mrs. Peck was very famous for saying a woman has to do what a woman has to do. And it was hard. It was hard on women. She did all the cooking. You know, she was famous for her cooking.
The Peck House has a wonderful balcony and porch looking out over the valley there. And on that porch, he fastened this great big brass ship's bell, which he would ring for dinner time or lunchtime.
Business at the Peck House was so booming in 1864 that James Peck built a second-story addition, nearly doubling the size of the house. By the late 1860s, a silver boom in nearby Georgetown lured business away, leaving the Peck family facing hard times.
In Colorado, you have this boom and bust economy, and many of these boarding houses might go up for taxes where you couldn't pay your taxes and someone else would buy it. Peck actually got into trouble. He managed to buy it back thanks to his mining income.
So that whole mining region, Empire, Georgetown area, that's going to ride the roller coaster of the mining economy.
By 1881, the Peck House had become the social center of Empire and the first residence to have a telephone and electric lights.
I actually honeymooned there and had a great banquet there. They have a great glass window and an open porch looking out over Clear Creek in the town of Empire.
At the turn of the 20th century, the Peck House was leased to numerous tenants, but remained owned by the Peck family for over 80 years. After enduring years of decline and neglect, it was finally revived as the Hotel Splendide in 1958 by two enterprising women, one who was the granddaughter of legendary Colorado brewer Adolph Coors.
The Peck House reminds us how a commercial enterprise originates from a spirit of hospitality and kindness. Strangers meeting and finding a place to pause and to feel that they are at rest in every sense of that. That's what the Peck House seemed to be offering a lot of people in its different stages.
Like Empire, Aspen, Colorado was at the center of a booming mining operation that lured not only miners, but entrepreneurs. Hotel Jerome was born from a vision to bring the refinement of Europe to this mini metropolis in the Rockies. Opened in 1889 during the height of Colorado's silver boom, the Jerome offered such rare amenities as a barber shop and a grand ballroom. Over its illustrious 130-year history, Hotel Jerome has always been one of Aspen's major landmarks, but it almost didn't happen.
There's evidence of litigation going on between contractors. People weren't getting paid. We don't know what that letter said, but those developers disappeared overnight and left the project incomplete.
Luckily, one of the investors would not let the hotel fail, and it was his name that would be carried into Colorado history.
This was Jerome B Wheeler, a very wealthy man who'd married in the Macy's family of Macy's department store fame, and came to Aspen with a lot of money and built this great hotel there named for him.
Mr. Wheeler is, we jokingly call him our rich uncle here in town. Not a founding father, but a strong investor. He had invested in our only smelting plant, one of two railroads. He had built a bank and given the city an opera house. He couldn't let this project not be complete. Because of the success of Aspen, this had to get finished or it would have been a black mark. So he funds the completion of the hotel, and the hotel opened on November 27th, 1889. So they built a 4-story, 3-floor, 92-room, 15 bathrooms, servicing those 92 guest rooms, brick hotel in less than a year.
It had marble floors, it had oak furnishings, it had this very elegant J-bar, which is still there, and a big, very spacious lobby.
Here in the middle of the Rocky Mountains, in the middle of an industrial city, was this European fine hotel. The newspapers once wrote that you could sit and have your whiskers trimmed in the barbershop, sipping on fine European brandy, awaiting your dinner to be prepared by the French chef, to be then followed by your dance lesson in the ballroom, all within the confines of the hotel.
Aspen was a great silver mining town, which goes from boom to bust very rapidly. And Jerome Wheeler goes bankrupt. He loses the hotel to a tax sale.
Then over the course of the next decade, until about 1903, it changed hands a lot. This hotel was kept open, the city paid the utilities, and a gentleman by the name of Mansour Elijah began to operate the hotel. By 1911, Mansour had saved up $3,000 and he bought this hotel for back taxes.
He turns it into a boarding house, lives there with his family, and also starts renting out rooms. And half of Aspen, who could no longer afford their own homes, move into the Hotel Jerome.
It was cheaper in the 1920s to come live here than buy coal to heat your own home. So families began to come and live here at the Hotel Jerome through the winter months.
But all the way through, even through Prohibition, you could drink Aspen Crud, as they called it at the J Bar, where they'd put whiskey in the milkshake and serve that to you.
Following World War II, Hotel Jerome was renovated and brought back to its Victorian grandeur by industrialist Walter Pepke. Before Aspen would become a world-class ski resort, Pepke promoted this quaint mountain town as a haven to replenish the mind, body, and soul.
Pepke is a very distinctive person, and he comes from Chicago, and he sees opportunities and meaning and magic in Aspen. So with the Pepke Renaissance that leads to Aspen becoming a center of thought and cultural vitality, Hotel Jerome gets a different lease on life from that.
It was a boarding house through the 60s and the 70s, well on up into the 1980s.
The Hotel Jerome, unlike many of these, never ever closed. Ever since it opened in 1889, despite all the hard times in Aspen, it's always survived.
Today, Hotel Jerome is the iconic symbol of Aspen, in part by maintaining its Victorian roots through its many chapters in Aspen's history.
The hotel was renovated in 1985, where European visitors were coming to visit Aspen as a ski resort. So it had kind of changed from rustic Western into more high class. And this hotel was the first four-star hotel servicing that clientele in a Victorian style.
We came here on our honeymoon. We bought our honeymoon cottage.
Gary and Sally St. Clair purchased the Peck House in 1981 and have carried on the legacy of operating this historic hotel for over 30 years.
We tried to make the Peck House what Mrs. Peck would have been proud of. It's sort of a time warp. The Peck House still looks like the pictures in 1862.
In 1970, a local group, a local downtown authority, purchased the Astor House with the intention of demolishing it and creating a parking lot there. The action galvanized a group of local preservationists, and they started a grassroots preservation movement. The city of Golden took a popular vote in 1970, and the people of Golden elected to buy the Astor House and preserve it, and a few years later, it served as a museum.
Astor House no longer serves as a museum, but the city of Golden is committed to its preservation and finding sustainable, appropriate uses for one of the community's great treasures.
So the Astor House is one lucky building to be in a community that's really asking some significant, deep thoughts about who they are in the present and how they originate from history.
Boarding houses in the United States really, I think, follow a trend with tastes and technology. One is after World War II, Americans come back and it becomes a much more prosperous time in the United States, and people start having their own vehicle. People want privacy and they want the ability to get around the country. And that's when hotels and motels become really popular in the 1950s. And that's when you start to see boarding houses really falling out of favor.
I think a boarding house was a wonderful institution, particularly for lonely, solitary people who wanted a family. You would be adopted into a boarding house. You'd have company there, you'd have companionship.
I think the legacy of boarding houses is that desire for shared living. In the 21st century, where we are increasingly isolated, people are searching for new ways to live together, to commune together.
While boarding houses are rare today, shared living spaces are making a comeback.
In some ways, it's by necessity. We live in a society where things are very expensive, where huge amounts of our salary are going towards our rent or to our mortgages. People are looking at that and questioning that if that's what they really want for themselves anymore.
You look at Airbnb, it's basically boarding houses. It's guest houses, whether people are there or not, because you can share an apartment with someone.
So we might think sentimentally about a boarding house, that people do have a sense of a family, a surrogate family, a community. We are really more because we were brought together, and the sentimentality around that should be in our picture when we think about what moved the people of the 19th century West and formed part of their identity.